Earlier today, the government publicly released the third and final part of the Canterbury Earthquakes Royal Commission's report, volumes 5 to 7. As I said last week, this inquiry was incredibly complex, and the Royal Commission's report and its recommendations have potentially wide-ranging implications for the entire country, not just Canterbury. The full report comprises 7 volumes in total, is more than 1,100 pages long, and contains 189 recommendations in total. There were 185 people who lost their lives in Christchurch and in the Canterbury earthquake on the 22nd of February 2011. Of those, 175 deaths were due to failures of buildings or parts of buildings. We owed it to the victims and their loved ones left behind, as well as those people badly injured in the earthquake, to find answers as to why some buildings failed so severely. There are many tragic stories from that fateful day on the 22nd of February where people lost their lives because they were heroically trying to rescue others, were hit by falling debris, or were simply caught in the wrong place while they were going about their daily business. The earthquake struck at the worst possible time, lunchtime on a busy workday in late summer. We have released the last parts of the Royal Commission's report today without an official government response because we wanted the families who lost loved ones to have access to the information as soon as possible. Yesterday, the Attorney-General, Chris Finlayson, and Building and Construction Minister, Maurice Williamson, travelled to Christchurch to meet some of the families of the victims named in the report. I'm advised it was a reasonably positive meeting, but understandably, many families are still grieving and struggling to deal with their loss. With regards to the collapse of the CTV building, Volume 6 of the Royal Commission's report provides a robust analysis of the building's failure. It identifies the roles that various people played in the lead-up to its failing so catastrophically during the earthquake on the 22nd of February. Many parts of the reports are highly technical in nature and necessarily so. The former Department of Building and Housing's technical investigation report, which was conducted by a panel of experts and released in February this year, was an input into the Royal Commission's report. The Royal Commission's report concludes the engineering design of the CTV building was deficient in a number of respects. It also concludes the building should never have been issued with a building permit by the Christchurch City Council because its design did not comply with the standards of the time. There were also inadequacies in the construction of the building. The Royal Commission accepts that overall there has been significant improvement in the way buildings are consented since the construction of the CTV building. We recognise the news will be of little comfort to the families and friends of the 115 who lost their lives in the CTV building on that fateful day. Nothing will ever bring back their loved ones, and we cannot dull their pain. My thoughts are with them as we continue to try and come to terms with their loss. The Christchurch earthquake was the largest natural disaster New Zealand has ever experienced in modern times, and the force of the earthquake was unprecedented. The forces from the earthquake were much bigger than even new buildings are designed to withstand. The Institute of Geological and Nuclear Science, GNS, has equated them to a 1 in 2,500 year seismic event. New buildings in New Zealand are designed to withstand a 1 in 500 year seismic event. The peak ground accelerations recorded during the earthquake in some parts of the city were more than twice the force of gravity, and the vertical ground accelerations were among the highest ever recorded anywhere in the world. Given the extreme severity of the 22nd February earthquake, for the most part the city's buildings generally performed well in terms of protecting life. Most buildings in Christchurch were sufficiently resilient for the occupants to get out of them alive, with the exception of the CTV building and the PGC building. However, there are now 1,400 buildings in the Christchurch CBD that have been or need to be partially or fully demolished due to the earthquake damage. That goes to show the absolute violent and destructive nature of this event. Last week, the government also released Volume 4 of the Royal Commission's report, which covers how earthquake-prone buildings are identified and managed. This was released alongside a Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment consultation document with proposals to improve the earthquake-prone building policy system. It is roughly estimated there are between 15,000 and 25,000 earthquake-prone buildings in New Zealand under the current policy and regulatory settings. We believe it's important for New Zealanders to have their say on proposed improvements to the system, as any decision will affect a large number of New Zealanders and communities across the country. This process is about ensuring we strike an acceptable balance between protecting people from serious harm and managing the economic implications of strengthening or removing the most vulnerable buildings. The Royal Commission was not responsible for determining legal rights and liabilities. These issues are more appropriately handled through other avenues, such as the New Zealand Police and the courts. The Government needs to take the time to carefully consider the report and its recommendations. Lessons must be learned from the Christchurch experience and changes made. Many of the recommendations in volumes 4 to 7 of the Royal Commission's report will require policy and legislative change. One thing the destructive earthquakes in Canterbury have highlighted is that we need to review and improve our system for dealing with earthquake-prone buildings in New Zealand. The Government feels that, after the experience of Christchurch, we need to take a more active role in ensuring buildings are up to standard. As I mentioned earlier, of the 185 fatalities that occurred in Christchurch due to the earthquake, 175 were due to failures of buildings or parts of the building. We need to learn from the experience of Christchurch, but we must also recognise and acknowledge that New Zealand is seismically active and we live with the risks of earthquakes every day. We also live with the risk in many other aspects of our lives every day. In fact, our chances of dying in an earthquake are about 1 in a million, compared to 1 in 10,000 from dying in a road accident. It's important to recognise there is no such thing as an earthquake-proof building. Any building may fail if the earthquake is big enough. It's about mitigating that risk to an acceptable and practicable level without being cost prohibitive. There will be an adjustment phase for building owners, but it's important to remember the current system requires earthquake-prone buildings to be dealt with. We are just proposing to put a mandatory national requirement and timeframe around it. We expect to issue our full and comprehensive response to the Royal Commission's report by early to mid-2013. Finally, I'd like to reiterate that the 185 people who lost their lives in the Christchurch earthquake on the 22nd of February will not be forgotten. We will consider the Royal Commission's report carefully, and we intend to make changes that will help save lives if and when the next big earthquake strikes.